Welcome back to the Dynasty Rewind YouTube channel. My name is Bob Man, the IDP man. Today, I'm here to bring you my offensive and defensive waiver wire for week 3. Let's get to it. The one thing I'll say before we get into this, I do want to note, if you're struggling, if you had a bad first 2 weeks, like I didn't even in a couple of my leagues, don't fret. It's still a very young season. There's still time to, fix things and get back into the thick of it. Let your studs kind of develop, as opposed to shipping them off for cheaper pieces at this point. Just be patient, cut the fluff where you can, and just do your best to be patient. The last caveat that I'll get into before I hop to the waiver wire is, I made these lists off of what I'm seeing available in my leagues, as well as what I'm seeing based on the rostership percentages for like NFL.com, Yahoo, so on and so forth. So you might be surprised to see what's out there. In Dynasty leagues, it's obviously going to be a little different. Not everybody's going to be so available because of the fact of purely that Dynasty rosters are a lot deeper more often than not. But with all that said, here's a list of the players I'm looking for on my waiver wires this week. Now, being my somewhat disorganized self, I'm not going to bounce around this list in any particular order. I'm just going to kind of bounce around. The first thing I want to touch on is the quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr, obviously oftentimes slept on guys. Good late round picks if you can get them. These are guys I'm seeing on the waiver wire in my home league. Derek Carr is already the yardage leader on the season and looking pretty dang good in that John Gruden offense. They can't run the ball, but they're looking good throwing the ball pretty much at will, actually utilizing all of their weapons in the offense instead of just hyper targeting Darren Waller. So Derek Carr is somebody I'm definitely looking for, especially if you're dealing with injuries to, say, Tua or Carson Wentz getting injured again, or you're just kind of scared of the injury bug that went around with quarterbacks this week. Those are two guys that are, I feel like, safer options that if you don't have a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, a Kyler Murray, these guys are safer options that you can grab off the wire. Jacoby Brissett is set to fill in if Tua can't go, and I'm not really into buying into that. And then when it comes to Carson Wentz, it's set to be Jacob Eason, who, again, not really willing to buy into. If it's a 2-quarterback league or a super flex league even, you're probably going to have to. But it's going to be a question of are they really going to be worth starting anyway? The answer for me is a lot of the times going to lean no, unless it's a super favorable matchup. But that is that on the quarterback positions. You'll notice that I have 2 Arizona players on this list, Rondale Moore and Max Williams. And, Rondale Moore, probably not going to be available in your dynasty leagues. That's just cut and dry. Rookies rarely sit out there for a long time. They usually get gobbled up in the draft and you never hear from them again until they're a bust 3 or 4 years down the road and they're cut by the original team that drafted them. When it comes to Rondale Moore, I'm not going to bank on him being available in a lot of dynasty leagues, but I will say that I am seeing him a lot in my redraft leagues. He's being utilized a ton in that Arizona offense, and if Kyler Murray is going to be putting up 5 touchdowns every week, one way or the other, definitely an offense you want to be a part of. Then we move on to Max Williams, who, didn't do a whole heck of a lot last week, but comes into this week. And if you somehow, for some grace of God, had him on your roster, you were pretty dang pleased with him this week. There was no real telltale signs that this was going to be happening. If you're hurting at tight end, if you're dealing with injuries, if you're dealing with guys that are just not performing yet, Max Williams could be a guy in a deeper league that you go out and grab. This would be a guy that I've seen pretty much in every one of my dynasty leagues. So if you're dying at tight end, if you run 2 tight ends in your league, whatever the case is, Max Williams should be on your radar. I do lean that he's going to be more of a touchdown dependent guy, though that wasn't the case this weekend. I think this was kind of a blow up game for him. But I do know they like him there a lot. They've, said that in all their press conferences and things like that Max Williams is a guy we really enjoy having around, and we want to get focused into the game plan more and more as the season goes on. Hollywood Brown, another guy that's a little less likely to be out there in your dynasty leagues. I will say that I'm higher on Hollywood Brown than I've ever been in terms of, how long he's been in the league. Was kind of worried he was injury prone and would kind of carry that through his career. However, he's been healthy now. When he's been able to be healthy in the past, he's done really well. So if that can continue on through the season, this guy's going to more than likely be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 at worst, in my opinion. And I'm still seeing him out on wires in my redraft leagues. Going to be a hard buy in Dynasty at this point. Doubt he's on any waiver wire in Dynasty, but somebody to look for, just because you don't think a player should be on waivers doesn't mean they can't be buried on the waiver wire. Move on to another player who's, kind of having a quote unquote breakout year, and that's Sterling Shepard, wide receiver out of New York. And, this guy looks better than he ever has. The number 3 looks better than the number 87, I guess. And whatever it is, he's all about this game plan now. I don't know if it's because they have Kenny Galladay on the outside where he's stealing coverage from him and he's able to kind of do whatever the heck he wants over the middle of the field. If Daniel Jones just decided, hey, this guy's really good and I want to throw his way all the time, I don't know what it is, but Sterling Shepard has put himself in a beautiful situation to be utilized, especially in PPR leagues. In standard, I'm not going to be too much a fan of him. I just don't think he's going to have the yardage upside on a weekly basis, but he's going to get a ton of dink and dunk catches. I think he's at least 7 receptions in the first 2 weeks. So he's off to a hot start in the reception category, not as much in the touchdown category. So if, like I said, if he's in a PPR and you have some touchdown upside, I think you're going to be in good shape. Moving on to Sony Michel, running back out of Los Angeles. And this is really just because of the whole Darrell Henderson injury concerns. If Darrell Henderson is back, I wouldn't necessarily say that Sony Michel ad is warranted. It could be one of those things you just kind of do to be safe. Not that I would say that drafting or picking up Sony Michel is safe by a lot of standards, but came in relief of Darrell Henderson and did pretty well. Seemed healthy, seemed quick. Didn't seem to have any lagging injuries from his days of dealing with lagging injuries. So a healthy Sony Michel in a Los Angeles Rams running attack. Probably not a bad grab for you in most formats. Another guy who I don't think is going to be on many waiver wires in Dynasty, that's my boy Michael Carter. Finally seeming to get some work. Did some real good things this weekend against a stout New England defense that the New York Jets couldn't get anything going against. Ran the ball 11 times for 59 yards. Pretty dang good yards per carry metric there, as opposed to Tevin Coleman, who only had 4 rush attempts. And it could be because this game was kind of out of hand early. I wouldn't be surprised if that was kind of the case, but the fact he's garnering more and more of a role, it bodes well, I think, for whenever this New York team ends up facing a better matchup that isn't going to be so tough against all facets of the game. Bill Belichick loves to eat rookie quarterbacks alive, and that's what happened this weekend. Moving on to J.D. McKissic, who was a completely forgotten about man, if you ask me, in terms of his after week 1's performance of just a total goose egg. Now he goes and has a monster game in most formats. And while it's unfortunate, I think that the reality is setting in that maybe Antonio Gibson isn't going to be what a lot of people want Antonio Gibson to be. And I think it's funny because I think there's Antonio Gibson such a fascinating topic to me because there was a last year narrative of, only 33 carries in college. Then we come into the NFL, he actually gets work and he does really well. And, there's just this huge dynamic shift of people who were low on him that are now high on him. It's that whole we missed out, we didn't evaluate him properly, whatever the case is. But now we're over projecting him to be way more than he's actually going to be, and not taking into consideration that J.D. McKissic is still going to get a lot of receiving work. He was in on all of the 2-minute drill stuff. So they're just a lot more confident in J.D. McKissic when it comes to the passing game. And then KJ Osborne is just a retread from last week. I thought he was just going to be more valuable in dynasty leagues. He might actually end up having some redraft value. Right away, start off the game with a bang with a 64-yard touchdown. Not a bad way to kick off the game. And then a couple of other retreads I have below the graphic here is Christian Kirk and Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick seems to be the guy that they're going to look for to be more of a steady option in that offense. And again, with Arizona, you want any piece you can get in this offense aside from probably AJ Green. Sorry, I think he's due for like one good game this year. And then everybody's going to get overhyped probably and hit the wires for him. But I'd rather have just about anybody else in this offense. This offense is cooking. If you can get yourself a piece and have at. Really quick before diving into the IDP waiver wire, I did want to shout out some of my favorite Monday Night Football predictions, as well as get into some over-unders at our favorite affiliate program, Underdog Fantasy. I use this all the time. I've gotten into a bunch of over-unders and rivals, pick'ems, you name it, more than I care to admit, but I'm having a blast doing it. It's another way to enjoy fantasy football and another way to play DFS if that is your thing. So taking a look at these props, looking at the DeAndre Swift prop of 69 nice and a half rushing yards. And I'm going to take the over on that. I do think this Packers defense, while it may bounce back from a abysmal week 1 performance, I do think they're awfully squishy. And I think 69 and a half, I think is kind of a smash pick there. When it comes to Aaron Jones hitting that 86 and a half, I'm not as confident. I'm going to leave that for the last pick I cover. Aaron Rodgers over 22 and a half, essentially. I'm going to hit the over on that as well. when it comes to Robert Tonyan hitting 34.5 receiving yards. Going to hit the over on that as well. And this one is one I would like to take the under on, but I'm going to take the over as the biased Packer fan, and I'm going to put in my $5 bid, submit that, and have a pick card for Monday Night Football. Just another way to enjoy the game. Say I'm out of the running in fantasy leagues, or my league is handled that week. Just another way to enjoy the game, sit back and have a little more invested and just enjoy it that much more. If you want to ride with me or pick against me over on Underdog, you can use the promo code REWIND, get you a $10 kickback on your first deposit. And you can do props like these for every night. On Sundays, there's a heck of a lot more props to get into. There's, obviously more of a slates to choose from. You can choose from the first and second slate for over and unders right away. New props are coming out every day, all the time. So get yourself over to Underdog, get in on the action, get into the winnings, and I'll see you there. And then we move on to the IDP side of things. And I dare say that New England might have a viable defensive option again in Josh Uche. There's a guy who's looking good right off the bat out of college. Didn't get a lot of run last year. It's just kind of the Belichick way. Rookies don't get a lot of run. He's a new guy in this defense and filling in a pretty dang good way, if you ask me. A guy who people are going to catch on to sooner rather than later. I think you can go add him now and have him for the long haul of the season and be a pretty reliable option for you, especially if you're dealing with injuries right away. TJ Watt probably going to miss significant time with a groin injury. Probably going to miss at least a handful of weeks. So Josh Uche could fill in for you. He's linebacker / DL eligible in sleeper, just like TJ Watt is. So somebody who you might be able to piece in. Moving on to Justin Reed, DB from Houston. One of my favorite players, already has 2 interceptions, one in each week. So far, obviously, that's not going to maintain throughout the season. God, if it would, that'd be pretty dang awesome. But when it comes to Justin Reed, like I said, one of my favorite players, one of my guys I'm rooting for at all times, showing that he's ready to play this year. You will probably see a questionable tag on him. I believe it was a leg injury, and it turned out that Coach David Culley came out after the game in a presser and basically said, like, hey, it was totally precautionary. We were out of the running for the most part anyway, so we just wanted to make sure one of our favorite players on defense was healthy going forward. Now let's talk some rookies, and Adafe / Jason Owe. I don't want to get anybody confused. It depends on the format. Some say Adafe, some say Jason Owe. So just so you're not looking for an Adafe Owe and there's only a Jason or vice versa. But each week I do a rookie report, and essentially the ones who I think are start worthy every week are going to be referred as graduates. And I think it's safe to say that Jason Owe or Adafe Owe is going to be the first graduate in that program. Coming off 2 weeks, essentially being a game breaker for that Baltimore defense, getting the sack last week, the huge forced fumble and fumble recovery this week to win the game. Just overall impressive for a guy who really in college, the big knock on him, like they mentioned on Sunday Night Football, was that he didn't make a lot of plays, especially in his final season in college. However, I don't know what book he read or who he's been learning from, but it seems that all that's out the window. This dude is looking like an all-pro already. Probably the best pass rusher on that defense. And I know Justin Houston is there too, but Justin Houston now is not the Justin Houston of old. But whatever this guy is doing, whatever Owe is doing, he's doing the right things. This guy is going to be a stud long-term, in my opinion, and be a staple of that defense going forward. Now talking another rookie that I'm not really ready to graduate yet, but is doing really well to work himself towards that. Still working on minimal reps, did some damage this last week, and that's Gregory Rousseau, deal out of Buffalo. This guy looks totally different built from his college days. He used to be such a tall, wiry frame, and now he's built to take damage and built to dish out twice that. I think there's going to be some hesitation on starting him right away to be willing to do that. However, if you wait on him now, you're probably not going to have your shot, because I'm feeling that he is probably going to be a guy who keeps building on this performance going forward, and a guy that you're going to want to get on your rosters as soon as possible. Real quick, diving into a retread from last week, just seeing him out on a ton of waiver wire still, and that's Nick Vigil, linebacker out of Minnesota. 2 top 15 linebacker weeks, depending on your scoring settings, the first 2 weeks of the season, proving that he's going to be a viable option for you going forward as an IDP. Somebody you really need to get on your roster if you're hurting at linebacker. Say you're worried that Devin Bush isn't going to be back this week or Jayon Brown isn't going to be back this week. And heck, he might just ride your roster the rest of the season, just like Eric Wilson did last year. Speaking of Eric Wilson, we'll dive into him right away. If you ask me, I think he is going to be the linebacker to roster over in Philly. Now, Alex Singleton got back onto the tackle train this week, and that is totally cool. However, Eric Wilson is just such a playmaker, always forcing fumbles, recovering fumbles, getting interceptions, things like that, where he's just going to end up offering a better ceiling than I think Singleton will. Unless you're in a league that offers a lot to tackles, then I think Singleton and Wilson can both be pretty similar. However, I think Eric Wilson down the road is just going to be the guy who's more valuable. Got full snaps last week, whereas Alex Singleton only saw about 60 some percent. Haven't seen the snap percentages this week yet, but I'm sure it's pretty similar. If they did get more, it's just because we do know that Alex Singleton may be getting more reps because San Francisco loves to run the ball. But in any event, Eric Wilson to me is slowly shifting towards the linebacker to roster in Philly. If anything, I think it's a close discussion that they're both probably equally as valuable, but neither is as valuable as they were last year. And then getting into Rayshon Jenkins, another guy I think is just kind of a safe floor, not going to be anything crazy. But if you're hurting at DB, if you just need a guy you can throw out there while your studs aren't performing, like a Jeremy Chin, who's been kind of off to a slow start, I think Rayshon Jenkins is a guy you can throw in. Safe floor, safe tackle floor, getting 100% reps. I don't think he's going to blow up and do any pick sixes or anything crazy or get a bunch of sacks or anything like that. But I think he's going to give you a safe floor in the meantime while you're kind of waiting on your studs to get back to their stud form and keep your defense competitive in the meantime. And then the last player I'll touch on is Grant Delpit, coming back from an Achilles injury. Did not play last week. However, he made up for it with a bang this week. Only registering 3 tackles, but getting a ton of work in all other aspects, getting those auxiliary plays, racking up impact plays like you would not believe. I'm feeling pretty good about Grant Delpit. Whether or not it's wouldn't say it's a byproduct of Anthony Walker not being there anymore, which I know some people might worry about. Since he only had 3 tackles, if he would have had like 20 tackles, I would have been a little more concerned about that. I would say that my main concern going forward would be the ability to maintain this level of impact plays while not having a tackle floor. And this is similar to my argument for Patrick Queen, who has completely eradicated that this season. So it shows that it's possible. Is that, if he's not getting that tackle floor up to like maybe 6 tackles a game at least, because then he only has to make maybe 1 impact play to really be decent for you on a weekly basis. If he's not having a tackle floor, he's just going to be super inconsistent with how his production lines up, in terms of you're going to see that peak and valley effect where there's going to be weeks where he scores you 20 points. And then there's going to be weeks where he scores you 3. And that's just not going to be awesome for you. You're not going to feel good about that. You're going to have a bad taste in your mouth later. However, Grant Delpit, somebody to go grab right now. Pretty lowly rostered on Sleeper, so I'm pretty confident he's going to be available in a lot of Dynasty leagues. So that is it for my week 3 waiver wire. Do feel free to drop in the comments below players you're thinking about looking at, and I will address those comments as they come in. Also, while you're in the comment section, feel free to comment on my Monday Night Football predictions as well as the over-under props. What are your predictions heading into Monday Night Football? What do you need to win your matchups? I hope you consider subscribing to the channel if you are new. We'll be doing a weekly waiver wire, a weekly recap, a Dynasty update podcast, as well as my weekly IDP rankings and my starts and sits going through my lineups every single week. We'll also be bringing you Devy content as well as draft content going forward in the future. Literally probably as much as you can handle from a fantasy football channel. That is it for the week 3 waiver wire in fantasy football. I do hope you all enjoyed. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like. Check out the other videos on the channel. I'd really appreciate it. That is it for me today, y'all. Have a good one.